In the last nearly 23 years of me playing Fire Emblem, I have probably played Blazing Blade at least 30 times. I've done all the difficulties and even an Iron Man that I livestreamed like 5 years ago on this very channel, which you can probably still watch in the playlist section somewhere if you really wanted to. However, a few months ago, I heard that a group of people who are responsible for creating the Pokemon Legacy game hacks did a similar one for Fire Emblem Blazing Blade, so naturally I had to see what was going on. And I found a lot of interesting things based on both my gameplay experience as well as the notes that they left for me. I'm going to leave footage of me playing through the pirate ship map, which is one of the more iconic ones from FE7, in the background for all of you to watch while I go through some of the major things that they changed. I'll keep it brief for some of you who might want a TLDR. The team for this basically rebalanced all the recruitable units so that they all feel better to use, as well as changed around the difficulties to feel more unique. Lyn Hard Mode was made more difficult. Eliwood Hard Mode was made to feel like the more definitive Hard Mode version of this game, and Hector Hard Mode was made more difficult so that it is more in line with a maddening tier of difficulty. They even added a casual mode for people who want it. There are a bunch of other micro changes, but this is the overwhelming thing, so let's talk about it first. Achieving a good level of balance is something I am most certainly well equipped to judge in FE7, simply because of how many times I've played it and how well I know the game. Even a change as simple as modifying a chest item or an enemy placement is something I can tell, and that makes me feel like such a big nerd saying out loud, but it's true. I will preface by saying that I only played Lyn and Hector hard modes, and I'm using that to judge the rest of the work, so I don't really know what they did with the Eliwood hard mode. Let's start with Lyn hard mode. Honestly, the first handful of chapters felt like nothing had really changed. If you've played Lyn Hard Mode, you already know that it's super easy, and aside from some micro growth buffs to some of the units like Will and Dorcas, it does feel similar for the most part. Where you do start to see some change is Chapter 8, the first time you come into contact with a ballista. Hard Mode with this hack seems to have two themes. The first is the increased enemy count to attempt to overwhelm you, as well as upscaling of enemy stats. I felt both of these in this chapter, and so for the first time in my playthrough in Lyn mode, I actually lost a character and had to restart. Granted, I was playing very reckless and actively trying to play FE7 as I normally would, and so it didn't work. Now, part of that is RNG, and part of that is suffering from success and Lyn critting one too many units on enemy phase, but alas, they did get the best of me. This ended up happening again in Chapter 9 because more enemies in a fog of war that isn't usually that threatening will do that to you. Of course, the enemies doing more damage also doesn't help. Aside from those two chapters, though, there wasn't too much craziness going on, and it felt like more of the same. They do, however, give you an Earth Seal on Wallace instead of a Night Crest, so you can actually early promote whoever you want in Lyn mode, which I kind of like that change. Also, a little pro tip. When units die in Lyn mode, they come back in Eliwood and Hector mode with auto-leveling and new stats. And since this hack buffed all the Lyn mode units when they come back, if there's someone you didn't use, just kill them off at the end of Lyn mode and reap the rewards. I did this with Kent since my Sane got RNG screwed, and I ended up using him instead in Hector hard mode for the entire run. Overall, I think they actually did a good job with Lyn mode here for people who are entering this game for the first time, but still want somewhat of a challenge. Now let's talk about Hector hard mode, because I definitely have some opinions on this one. First off, I feel like the initial part of the game is usually the hardest part because your units are low level and the enemies are tough. Once your own army levels up, promotes, gets good weapons, and starts rolling, there's usually very little you can do to stop them. However, I don't know that I really felt challenged in the point of this game like I really wanted to. Marcus is still Marcus in the early game. He just starts to fall off slightly earlier because enemy speed starts to pick up a little bit. Oswin is still just as dominant, and Hector still obliterates the entire game. Lyn being stronger with access to the Wind Sword and Eliwood having Lance access at the start also feel like rather strong additions even in a higher tier difficulty. Chapters like 13X, which would have been previously slightly difficult to do for some, and even grabbing that 5k gold in the top right corner for most people was surprisingly smooth for me. They also gave Bartray some pretty good buffs, and he feels pretty damn good to use in this version. He was actually one of my strongest units. One of the first points of contention I had with this hack was 19X. This one actually felt too easy. Don't get me wrong, 19X is usually an easy chapter with the caveat that Kishuna is a rough go in order to unlock 19XX. Now, they also removed that part. For some reason, they thought that giving Kishuna 0 defense was a good idea here, and now you can just simply one-shot him with that killing edge that Guy comes with. Any other combo with a couple of silver weapons you have access to, or even steel, will honestly just completely shred him. Couple that with the fact that the NILS level 7 requirement was removed to unlock the chapter, and let's be real, that was probably a good change anyways, but now unlocking 19XX just doesn't feel like a reward anymore. I know save states exist and that I'm probably gatekeeping, but I remember how excited I felt killing Kishuna on my original GBA cartridge all those years ago, that it just makes this kill kind of meaningless, and for a game that wants to be a more definitive version, removing that thrill or reward or sense of accomplishment doesn't feel great. Dragon's Gate, on the other hand, was a chapter they actually modified successfully to be more challenging. By adding in more enemy pressure, it makes it harder for you to get Legault in time. However, I think they forgot that you can just choke point all of those reinforcements while going up with a small party to the top left corner and wait for Legault to come through there. Otherwise, the chapter isn't that bad, but they did catch me off guard with things like the mages from that small room being able to actually break the walls, and my Eliwood did end up dying because of it, so I actually quite like this one. Chapter 22 is one I did not enjoy, and it started to become a bit of a theme with this game going forward. The enemies start having stronger weapons, promoted units start appearing far earlier than they normally do, and the enemy count just starts increasing by so much. I actually usually like this chapter, and I felt like it was a well-designed defense map that rewards you for getting the adequately placed side objectives. Here, I just felt like I was getting flooded with enemy units to the point where they were just body blocking me from reaching my secondaries in time. Don't get me wrong, I did it anyways, but the enemies weren't strong. It wasn't smart placement, and it ended up just being a quantity over quality kind of deal. There wasn't really anything intelligent about it here that was changed much, except maybe that the enemies open doors and break walls pretty fast now. I guess the green unit AI was buffed to be smarter, so there's that. Oh, and Wrath comes at level 13 and ready to promote now, so they buffed him too, which was a fantastic change. As a matter of fact, every single unit with hard mode bonuses in Hector hard mode got a bit of a buff in this game since they buffed enemy growths. So your Ravens, Guys, Heaths, Vitas, etc. got way better than they already were. Outside of that, they didn't really make any crazy changes. I think they just made Battle Before Dawn harder than it was previously, with more promoted units and a more full left side of the map, so if you already hated it, you'll probably hate it more. Pale Flower of Darkness is now a massive map, with both Jeremy and Kenneth for some reason, which I thought was a bit of an odd choice, but whatever. The rest of the maps are honestly not too different otherwise, and just have more enemies piled on. Overall, I think they wanted to toe the line of making changes, but not changing too much, and in some places it worked, like for a few chapters in Lin mode and some of the chapters in Hector Hard, but by the final third of the game, I think it just feels like more of what was already there, which I guess is what they intended. At the end of the day, they're not setting out to completely redesign the game, but more so balance what already existed, and I think if that's the aim, then the job was pretty well done. Now we get to the interesting part of the review here, and that's whether or not I would recommend playing this over the base game for a first-timer. Honestly, there are two ways I can go with this. The drawback of playing this one first is that once you experience this game, it'll be difficult to go back to the old one as a first-timer due to the lack of quality of life and character improvements. There are things that stick with you, and trying to play the original will just feel off and awkward. Sure, it might feel that way out the gate anyways if you're used to more modern games, but there's something fresh about experiencing the game in its origin state and how it was designed, and then seeing the fresh upgrade with the fancy new sprites, the boosted ally stat lines, and improved quality of life features. On the other hand, if that antiquated feel is the reason you're not experiencing FE7 for the first time, then maybe playing this version will help bridge that gap, and so my verdict is ultimately that you do experience this game in some way, shape, or form, because I personally love it, and think it's one of the best entry Fire Emblem games in general, and probably one of the more solid games in the series all around. I could play this game anytime and get into it. It's one of my comfort games that brings back the warm and cozy feelings of my childhood, if you can even believe that I had that to begin with. And overall, I think the team did a great job towing the line between preserving the feel of the original game while providing a tune-up, and it gave me a chance to play one of my all-time favorite games once again. If you haven't played FE7, play it in some way. And if you have and are curious, I'll leave a link to where you can get this new version if you'd like to try it. Having said that, that's all for this video. If you guys have stuck around this year and followed my content, thank you. If for some reason you're not subscribed, that would be a nice little New Year's gift present for me if you want to do that. This is probably going to be my last video of 2025. I wasn't as productive as I would have liked to be this year. I had a busy second half of the year, both at work and in real life. So for everyone who's been around, I thank you guys, and hopefully we'll be more productive in 2026. Having said that, I'll see you with another video soon in the new year. Peace.